copies of most of the replicas of the so-called ancestors here. I'm telling you, all of them are either fully ape or fully human.
Slight changes over generations add up to big changes when you look down the line. One person speaking Latin didn't give birth to a person speaking Spanish, you know? I think you're doing a lot of oversimplifications. You're talking about the links, lines on paper. So those lines on paper are linked by fossils and genetics, not just some guy drawing it.
We have those with such good imaginations that they really believe banana plants and whales are related, and that man is just an ape. Early Man by Life magazine. One of the most popular March of Progress charts ever sold exists inside of it. More schools have this image hanging up than any other image regarding human evolution. But let's actually zoom in and read what the small print actually says. First we come to Pliopithecus. You will notice it says, long considered to be an ancestral gibbons, the Pliopithecids are now known to be far removed from gibbons, or indeed any other living primates. So they admit that this doesn't even belong in the very chart. And it's the first step of this process, and it says underneath it that it's not true. Now, on to the next one, which is another supposed intermediary, which to them would now be the first step of man, which is proconsul. Well, they consider it a very early ape, an ancestor to the chimpanzee and perhaps the gorilla. So we have another pure ape, which they still cannot identify as to what species it even is. But yet, there it is, standing up, representing human-like bipedalism. That is strike 2, but let's move on. Next we have Dryopithecus. We read that after investigation of the skull, rather than evolving earlier than the great apes was as previously thought, it was actually just a great ape itself. A knowingly admitted lie right there in front of your eyes. I give this strike 3 on proving any human evolutionary tree whatsoever, and we've only looked at 3. So literally, their entire first links of the chain are admitted to not be part of the chain in the small print underneath. That would be strike 3. Next we have Oreopithecus, and this is hilarious because they start off by literally saying this is a side branch of the human family tree, meaning, yet again, it is not part of the March of Progress chart that it's on. And they are showing you it is part of the human lineage. But let's keep reading. Oh, look at that. It was clearly an aberrant ape. Shocker, I know. You will also notice that it is standing upright and walking when they know it's a lie. That would be strike 4. Next we have Ramapithecus. This was thought to be a distinct genus that was the first direct ancestor of modern humans, before it became regarded as that of the orangutan ancestor. Again, portrayed standing erect and walking, so strike 5, another fraud on the chart, shown in the March of Progress that doesn't belong there. Strike 5. Oh, man. Next, a famous one, Australopithecus africanus. It tells us they possessed the brain size of apes, had ape-like skulls, and was similar to body size and shape to apes. So if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, walks like a duck, shaped like a duck, the size of a duck, then surely it's a duck, right? Yet, there it is, an admitted ape species with the characteristics of an ape in the human family tree, portrayed walking just like humans. They don't even try to say anything about it being transitional or having any features of transitional because it's clearly an ape. Here is something most people don't know. They changed its name to Paranthropus robustus, and that's how it's known today. Do you know why? Because para means beside, and anthropus means man. So it means beside man, meaning not leading to modern day man. Not only was it a different lineage, but an entirely different evolutionary branch than us. Yet there it is on the flow chart, leading from primitive primate ape ancestor to modern day man. Another lie. Strike 7. So now, let's look how far in we are. Notice that? Halfway through, and every single one is an outright ape. And at the very bottom, we read, although proto-apes and apes walked on all fours, all are shown here standing for the purpose of comparison. Sure it is, everyone. They want you to see them as human-like as possible, because they know that pictures are worth 1,000 words. And they know nobody's going to read that small print. And it's going to look and appear as though apes became humans.
Anthropology is the study of human evolution. Scientists have been saying for years that humans evolved from apes. Now, is there evidence in the fossil record? Or is this because somebody has a little too much money and power? Well, let's find out. Chimp eyes are googly, and the human eyes are kind of flattened like an oval. The nose on chimps or apes is going to be totally flat with no canopy covering the nostrils, whereas the human nose will have a little ridge here, a little spine sticking up here under the nose, and this will create a canopy for the nostrils, absent in apes. If you look at the chimp from the side, you'll see that you can't really make out the eye pit, if you will, whereas it's clear on a human. Chimps have sharp canine teeth, whereas the human canine teeth are dull. See there? Dead giveaway. You'll also notice that in a primate skull, the cranium and the face about the same size, whereas in a human, the cranium is going to tend to be a little bigger than the face bones. The forehead of an ape does not exist. Humans have foreheads. They have a cranium that extends above the brow ridge significantly. An ape has a sloping face, more horizontal, whereas a human has a more vertical face going up and down. See the slope, and then here you see one. Let's cover the last two differences between the human and the ape skull. The teeth of an ape are going to be U-shaped, okay? So they're just going to be lined up on either side. They're going to be parallel, whereas the human teeth will be parallel but at an angle. Okay, so you have more of a V shape for the human lower jaw, and then in the ape lower jaw you have a U shape, and also the foramen magnum, which is where the hole where the spinal cord enters into the cranium, will be straight up and down in a human, and in a chimp or ape it will be entering into the skull at an angle. Australopithecus afarensis, otherwise known as Lucy, and the fossil was named after the song by the Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, which abbreviation is LSD, which they must have been on when they discovered this fossil, because they're saying that it was an ape on its way to a human. Otherwise, based on their interpretation of the bones, they say that this was an ape mind inside of a basically human body. You know, you got the titties and the canine teeth, but then you also have bipedal locomotion, you know, and you have no opposable thumbs on the feet, so it's just like a human. It's just an ape in a human body. Anybody who knows anything about ape anatomy knows Lucy is an ape.
The tongue child. The tongue child was found in 1924 These proportions he interpreted as being consistent primarily with a hominin and not with something like a chimpanzee or a gorilla. Likewise, characteristics of the teeth and the jaw, he pointed out, are inconsistent with ape fossils and are consistent with hominin fossils. And the specific anatomy of the nose here, with the nasal bones, the fossil of Littlefoot skeleton that is being described right now in the literature shows pretty clearly, I think, that these creatures could walk around on two legs. But they were not, in fact, human. I found no evidence that suggests that these creatures...
In some cases, you're talking about very narrow passageways. You got to go up, you got to go down, you got to go sideways. It's actually not easy to get in. And when you finally get into the big room that's just before it, you have to go over a huge boulder. And they've searched all over the place for any other route, and there's no other route in there. But to go all the way through the cave like this, most of which is in the complete darkness of the cave, and then you have to go over the big boulder and down into the room. How did they get there? How did these human bodies get to that location? One's first thought is, well, they're probably drug in there by carnivores. There's evidence of damage, paramortem damage, which might have caused their death. We don't know what caused their death. There's no indication in the bones themselves. If they stayed in that region, they would use this chamber for...
So Homo naledi is a collection of human fossils that's been found basically in a not easily accessible cave, let's just say that. So this was a cave where humans were disposing their dead. They were humans. They were not apes. So it's not a transition. It's not in the human lineage. It doesn't go back hundreds of thousands of years or whatever.
I want to make it clear, first of all, that individuals don't evolve. Populations do. Like one individual is just going to give birth to something totally different. And evolution is not a linear process. It's not always clear what evolved into what. It's more of a web or a tree. I'm also going to talk a lot about Australopithecines because it's argued a lot by creationists that they were just an extinct species of ape, which they are apes, but they are in our lineage. It's argued that they were not bipeds. There's even a statue at the Creation Museum of one on all fours, looks just like a chimp. And also, Lucy is not the only one of those. There are many specimens, but that's the one that the creationists tend to jump on. So first fossil evidence, it starts with Sahelanthropus about 7 million years ago, and there's not much known about that one, but it's still probably in our lineage. Then Auroran tongensis, about 6 to 7 million years ago, had femur structure suggesting that it walked upright, but its fossils are pretty scant. Then there's Ardipithecus cadava, and Ardipithecus ramidus. Ramidus being the most complete. It had skeletal structures that indicated it walked upright at least some of the time, probably not all the time. And what I'm really going to focus on are the Australopithecines for the fossil evidence because, like I said, they focus on Australopithecines the most, creationists. They argue it's just an ape, not related to us, walked on all fours. And again, Lucy's not the only one. Probably the most famous one should be the Littlefoot fossil, which is an almost complete Australopithecus prometheus. But most people don't even know it exists. So some of the skeletal structures of the Australopithecines that indicate they did walk upright were the ankle. The ankle bones were square-shaped instead of trapezoid-shaped like a modern chimp. There's an adaptation for walking. The metatarsals indicate an arch and a stiff midfoot, unlike a modern chimpanzee or gorilla or anything, and more like a human. The spine was S-shaped instead of arch like a modern chimp. The rib cage was barrel-shaped, as evidenced by the big man fossil specimen of Afarensis, instead of cone-shaped like a chimp. Its pelvis was short and bowl-shaped rather than elongated. like a modern great ape, non-human great ape. The femurs and knees also were angled in such a way to indicate body length. However, it's short, robust. Its walking wrists like a modern chimp, and its skull was only about 100 cc bigger brain capacity than a chimp. So we'll go on to the earlier Homo genus. Like Homo habilis, there's some debate about whether it should be an Australopithecine or not. Most say it's in the Homo genus. It has just a slightly bigger brain capacity. And from there, Homo erectus goes up. Homo neanderthalensis, which is not our ancestor, it's more of our cousin, but it had a bigger brain capacity. Now, humans and apes share a few key traits. We have the same number of bones, muscles, same number of teeth, several blood type systems in common. Regions that code for protein in the DNA are 99% similar. They can be interpreted differently as being about 80% similar. If the whole thing would count, as this channel has pointed out correctly. But yeah, closer than any other animal in the animal kingdom. Endogenous retroviruses. There are some, I've seen this channel in particular try to rationalize how these make sense, but endogenous retroviruses are when a virus infects like a sperm cell or an egg cell. It's grafted into the genome and passed on to offspring. We share 99.8% of those with chimps, which that really only makes sense if we share a common ancestor. Diseases, we share many diseases with great apes, HIV being the most obvious one, but there are also two populations recently found with chimps that have leprosy, likely passed from humans. And behavioral, I won't touch much on that, but intelligence, there have been several great apes that have learned sign language or learned to use a lexigram. You learn hundreds or even thousands of symbols to communicate. Neanderthals, I'll talk more about those later. Now, if the creation story were literally true, there are two genetic bottlenecks in our lineage, starting with Adam and Eve, and then again, 1,500 years later, or 2,000 years later, with the Noah's flood, where there are only three pairs, Noah's sons and their wives. But genetics reveal only one major bottleneck in our history, and that's about 50 to 100,000 years ago, where the population got down to a few thousand individuals. And Francis Collins, the doctor of the Human Genome Project, who was a Christian himself, said, unfortunately, there's no evidence that we descended from Adam and Eve. Now, primate and human anatomy. Taxonomically, we are primates. We have flattened nails instead of claws. We have opposable thumbs, and our fingerprints we have fingerprints. We have binocular vision with depth perception. We have eye sockets with a cup of bone supporting the eye. We have well-developed collarbones with high shoulder mobility. And Meissner's corpuscles under the fingers. Touch receptors, which is a trait we share exclusively with primates. And so that's just basically the opening statement. Is there evidence for human evolution? Yes, there is.
What does it mean to be human? I got a ton of stuff on that. Itchy eyes, sneezing, may blame the allergy on Neanderthal. And they draw these pictures like they have the bigger brow ridge. Well, the Bible says before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old, average 912. After the flood, it dropped off to 400 years, and then down to 200, and today hardly anybody makes it to 100. Well, the fact is, but a simple anatomy course would tell you, your brow ridge never stops growing. As you chew, the masseter muscle and the temporalis muscle and the frontalis muscle pull on the brow ridge, just the chewing action. So if you're chewing, any bodybuilder will tell you, when you use a muscle a lot, it builds bigger bone. The muscle pulling on the bone stimulates bone growth. So chewing for a long time would stimulate bigger brow ridge. So if somebody's living to be 800 or 900, you get a bigger brow ridge. It has nothing to do with being Neanderthal or ape-like or anything else. They lived a long time. This guy sent me his pictures to Brothoven. Look at me, I'm Neanderthal, and I love your videos. Well, here's a Christian Neanderthal man. He's still alive in Philadelphia, by the way. How about David Harbour? Is he Neanderthal with a big brow ridge? Is he half human, half ape, or is he fully human? 20 physical traits you might have inherited from Neanderthal. The hump on the back of the skull, the occipital bun. Well, that's when you bend over and pull yourself up, the muscles on the back of your neck, sternocleidomastoid, etc., they pull on your head, your skull. Of course, it's going to elongate after a while. These muscles are what's pulling your head back up when you bend over. So again, if you live to be 900, you'd have bigger brow ridge on the front and bigger occipital bun on the back.
Ape-like creature into a human, not in one generation. It doesn't just happen overnight or in one generation. Of course, a human is not going to give birth to something totally different. It takes millions of years. That's what evolution teaches. That's why there's such a long time frame. It takes millions of years. That's what evolution teaches. That's why there's such a long time frame.
At some point, the dog came from something that was non-dog. I mean, the lines on paper show actually a single-celled ancestor turning into what eventually would be, those with the backbone, which might include the dog. So at some point in your religion, in your theory, you would have to say that a non-dog produced a dog. And you said it took millions of years. That's not science. It's not observable. That's my point. You guys can believe this all you want, but it's not science. And drawing lines on paper between all these creatures claiming they're connected is not science. You said something about the bones. They can tell when they find bones of a murder victim, whether it was male or female, and et cetera, about approximate age. Well, that wasn't my question. My question was, can you from the bones tell it had any children? And can you tell it had children that were different than itself? From the bones, could you tell this animal produced something that was different than what itself was, whether it be human or chimp or ape or something like that? So arranging bones on a shelf is not evidence either of anything, okay? It's just a matter of, good organization skills, arranging things.
The fossils show nothing, of a progression. With the ape fossils, okay, it's either an ape or a human, and in genetics, you have to take certain sections of the gene pool, okay, and then compare them to the human gene code. Now, just because I can compare things, and they match in one area doesn't mean that other areas aren't different, okay? There's many genetic differences between humans and apes, and a fifth grader can figure it out in basic genetics. A class on basic genetics. Many differences between humans and apes genetically, even if they were 98% similar, which they aren't. These are 2% of a dramatic difference, okay? And that's just being generous, even if it is 98. But it's more like 90%, and in that 90%, yes, there are similarities, okay? Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint have many similarities, but that doesn't mean that they evolved from Morse code 3 billion years ago. So the simple fact is, just because you can exchange the lug nuts on a Pontiac with those of a Chevy doesn't mean that they evolved from a skateboard, okay? There is a common designer, not a common ancestor. And if you compare the chromosomes, say, of, a human and many other life forms, they're very similar, okay? If you compare height, and you compare how many children, one animal has and another, and then you could put that on a chart and say, that they're related. There's some kind of progression of evolution, but if you look at just the chromosomes, some tobacco plants have 48 chromosomes, whereas the human chromosomes only equal 46. So if we just keep evolving, eventually we'll be a tobacco plant, right? I know some people who are already on the way. You get in the elevator and you say, man, you're evolving. Fossils are hoaxes or misrepresentations, just like the phylogenetic trees, and the graphs that they have. They are misrepresented, and you can do that on any graph. You can make any graph and make it look like this is a true reflection of the fact, when in reality it's just an exaggeration. Graphs can hide certain information, and anybody that's worked for Fox 23 or any mainstream media where they show a graph knows this, that you can make a graph say anything that you want and make it look convincing, as long as you're not willing to actually look at the facts.